So I am going to bring him in. We're joined with the one and only Ted Rall. Ted Rall is political cartoonist and syndicated columnist and a great friend of the show. Ted, welcome to the show, my man. How you doing this morning?
I'm good, Jamarl. How are you doing?
I am doing good. Give me one second, Ted. I just want to fix this.
Yes, I heard that little
There we are.
recursive
There we
thing.
are. Perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to get rid of echo because there's a bit difference when I have a guest on. I have to cut that on. When I don't have a guest on, I have to cut that off. It's okay. But how you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm totally fine. Ready for the week.
Ready for the week? I don't think I got your take on the election. Give me your point of view about Trump winning the election. Just kind of an overview as we step into this conversation.
Well, I'm not happy that he won, but she didn't deserve to win either. And so, basically, look, it's funny when you talk about a sitting vice president of the United States to say that she had not really introduced herself to the public, but that was
Well,
true. And so, my view is that, I think she kind of just like thought, and the Democrats thought, this is self-evident. Like, look at me. I'm not Donald Trump. I'm younger. I'm saner. I'm a woman of color. I'll make history. I'm inherently better than he is. And the voters weren't having any of that. And this is one of those perfect storm things where you can point to, there's not one mistake that,
mhm.
that she made or that her campaign made. I think there's dozens.
Yeah.
And it's hard to parse them. It was hers to lose. Donald Trump was a deeply wounded candidate with major legal problems. He screwed up. There's in the one and only debate that he had. Um,
Mhm.
his personality is not liked even by most of the people who voted for him. So the voters would have definitely supported her if she'd given them a reason to, and that she didn't give them a reason to. She obviously, look, we're talking about if the vote had gone, 2% the other way, she would have won,
Yeah.
right? Or 5 or 3% the other way. But for those people in the middle, right? Like the people who decide these elections, right? 45% of the country votes Democratic no matter what, 45% votes Republican no matter what. So we're talking about those people who are kind of like, I don't know. Those people, I think the reality was basically as follows. I hate this economy. I hate the high prices. And there's long-standing grievances, no matter where you lived in the country. And basically, the political system has felt non-responsive to the basic needs of most Americans for a
Right.
long time, for
Right.
decades, by both parties. And so one, I think, major thought that I've had that I have not previously thought of was in 2020, the assumption is that Joe Biden won the election. I'm not going to say that there was hacking or cheating or anything like that. There wasn't, in my opinion, not to enough to an extent to change the outcome. But Democrats fooled themselves because they neglected the fact that Trump basically shot himself in the foot by saying, "Don't vote early." And
Yeah.
so if he hadn't done that, he probably would have won 2020. In other words, Donald Trump effectively was the favorite in all three races that he ran. Democrats thought, well, we beat him. And Joe Biden said it repeatedly, I beat him, therefore I can beat him again.
Right.
That's the faulty logic of an old man with dementia. That is not like reality, right? The reality is like, I kept saying it. Trump will not make that mistake again. He will tell his people to vote early. And in fact, Republicans absolutely ran the table in early voting. So
Yeah.
they fixed that problem. They knew they needed to fix it. And so given that fact, they went in really overconfident. They thought like, okay, all we have to do is run as a generic Democrat. And the people were not in the mood for a generic anything.
Right.
Donald Trump basically recognized we have radical problems. He recognized that in 2016 when he looked out the window of his limousine in downtown Dayton and looked at all the boarded up factories where I grew up and said, in places like that, and said, this must suck. This reality must suck. And so just by being able to talk about it and articulate it, he made a lot of voters feel seen for the very first time. Okay, so the point is, those people have been living like that for years,
Yeah.
and so that reality has not been fixed, right? Trump didn't fix it. Biden didn't fix it. It's still the reality. Lordstown plant is still closed in northeastern
Hmm.
Ohio. So those people are kind of like, okay, I'm trying to send a message. Like East Dearborn, right? Palestinian, voted for Trump. Why?
Yeah.
Not because they thought he was going to be good on Israel and Gaza, because in their mind, there's really only two parties. I disagree with that. I voted for Jill Stein. But in most Americans' minds, there's two parties, and you can vote. And the only way you can send a message is to send an anti-message. The
Right.
anti-message was Harris didn't see us. She didn't let our people even talk at the convention. Fuck her. And so that was basically, that was it. So I mean, basically, this is a system that's been completely non-responsive. Donald Trump recognized we have radical problems. I will offer radical solutions. I will deport millions of people. I mean, these are not good solutions in my view, but they are big radical solutions. And what Kamala Harris was offering was incrementalism.
Mm-hmm.
Incrementalism satisfies no one unless you live in an awesome, booming economy where
Right.
everybody's doing great and nobody has any significant problems. Then you don't want to rock the boat or change anything. That's not the reality of Americans, whether they are left, right, or in the middle, rich, poor. Everyone feels that the system is non-responsive and not taking care of business. I mean, whether you're, worried about crime, it's like in the inner cities and massive shoplifting and all that, or you're worried about education, or you're worried about your high rent or college tuition or whatever it is, healthcare. The point is, these are big problems. And Kamala Harris isn't even saying, like, if I get my chance, you give me nice Democratic Senate and Democratic House, I'm going to like rock it. We're going to do socialized medicine. We're doing we're going to do free. We're going to have free community college. Trying to work for 4 years like Europe has. Like all that stuff. You'd be like, okay, she's ambitious, but literally what she was promising was, if I win, things will not fundamentally change.
Right.
And people really wanted things to fundamentally change. And I don't know if they trust Donald Trump to do that. They're trying to wake up the Democrats. They're like, hello, McFly, wake up. That's what this is about. And I think in a two-party system, all people can do is flail back and forth, like to vote against what's bugging them the most for a thing that bugs them slightly less.
Agreed.
So that's why it keeps going. And both parties keep thinking like, it's kind of like two guys trying to date the same girl. And like, so she dumps one and the other one's like, oh, it's because I'm awesome. It's like, no, you're not awesome. You're just the only other guy in town. So that's what's going on here.
What's wild about it, and look, I totally agree with you. If you look at the exit polling, the people who were not hurt voted Harris, like by significant degrees. The people who said that they were moderately hurt during the economy, or for that matter, experienced serious hardships by the economy, voted for Trump overwhelmingly. Like, it's not even close. Also, Donald Trump won demographic shift, meaning he was able to get into Democratic majorities in 49 out of 50 states. That's just an astonishing number. Blacks, youth vote, Hispanics. In fact, he got more Hispanic vote than has ever been recorded in our political history. He got more of the black vote than 40 years, I think, going all the way back, even before Nixon or something, like some insane number. And apparently, Republican majorities, the Republicans were able to get the popular vote on Donald Trump's coattails, a larger number going back to 1928. Like, these numbers are rather astonishing. He beat her by 4 million more votes, only raised $390 million compared to Kamala Harris raising over $1 billion. And Harris still ended up $20 million in debt after raising $1 billion in 3 months. Outrageous.
It's strange. I mean, okay, now in fairness, she didn't have that $1 billion wasn't in a single pot, right? So her campaign was, that was divided up between super PACs and whatnot.
Well, wait, just to be clear, she raised over $1 billion. The super PACs themselves pulled in $1.6 billion total, but Harris herself was able to raise over $1 billion.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, then I mean, that's insane. It reminds me a lot of when John McCain early on in the 08 cycle went broke after having a massive money advantage, and it turned out he was like involved in a really high flying campaign. Everyone was flying first class, and it's like, what the hell are you doing, dude?
No, agreed. But it's like, what the hell are you doing, dude? But if you remember back in the primaries, Kamala Harris ran out of money also. Like that was one of the
Yes.
things that I mean, before she got to Iowa, she had sent out the report saying, "Hey, I'm ran out of money. I need to stop my campaign." I guess, and just to be clear, just to go over some of the stuff,
She also ran out of
she spent
votes.
$100,000 on a "Call Me Daddy" set. That was the set where she went with that young woman to talk about politics.
Mhm.
She was flying a banner over football games. She spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that for each game. Her face on the spire or the sphere in Las Vegas, she spent what $450,000 a day to do
What?
that.
What?
I mean, she's trying to reach certain demographics, including apparently millions of dollars to buy social media influencers, which are basically campaign ads. I don't even know if all of those people told that they were being paid by Kamala Harris to boost Kamala Harris. Do you think there's going to be this kind of crisis within the consultant class of trying to figure out how do we waste this much money? And more to the point, do you think there's going to be soul searching and autopsy that takes place, whether in earnest or behind the scenes of the Democratic Party?
Well, the answer to the first question is absolutely not, because for the consultant class, billions of dollars in fees raining down to buy crap like you just described. That's a
Mm-hmm.
feature, not a bug. That's a glorious party. That's like back when I used to go to Studio 54. I didn't suggest that they water down the drinks. I was very happy with the way things were. That's totally the way. That's how this is going to be too. I mean, are you kidding? They're like, no, you need to spend more money, raise more money. Like, this, like, don't, by all means, waste a lot of money on us. Soul searching. You know, what you would want to see in any kind of defeat, after any kind of defeat, and I would say actually after a victory also,
Yeah.
because let's just say she had won, but then you can't just pat yourself on the back and say, look, we won, so we don't have to change anything. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you leave money or votes on the table that you should have gotten, and in your after action report, you should say, we were shy 6% in this demographic that we ought to have gotten. We should work harder next time. So winning
Mm-hmm.
is not really enough reason not to. I think there should always be a cold-blooded after action report to weigh things. Like, for example, if she had said, I will only sell defensive weapons to Israel, not
Right.
offensive weapons,
Right.
or I expect the war to be wrapped up by January 20th. How many Jewish or pro-Israel votes would she have lost vis-a-vis how many pro-Palestinian, pro-Gaza progressive votes would she have gained? Those kind of that kind of analysis is important.
Yeah.
And I don't know that if they're going to do that in any kind of credible way. I mean, what I'm seeing so far is pretty dispiriting. It seems to be a lot of the usual. The blame, well, a lot of there's nothing to blame. I mean, you hear people like Donna Brazil, and they're basically like, well, she ran the best possible
Yep.
campaign. Joy Reid, she ran the best possible campaign you could possibly run. It's like like Candide, all for the best in this best of all possible worlds. It's like, well, by definition, that's not true.
Yeah.
You lost, okay? And secondly, you didn't run against Obama. You ran against Trump, who was, literally had to win or face going to prison. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, that's ridiculous. And that's one of those things, like, not only, as my old lawyer used to say, not only is that not true, that cannot be true.
Yeah.
And then in terms of, the, in terms of the, the after action report, in terms of blame, it's like, okay, some people are blaming progressives. Interestingly, they have not blamed Jill Stein or third party votes. I guess because the margin was bigger than what Jill Stein got. And
Yeah.
also Jill Stein and Libertarian candidate Chase Oliver polled about the same. So they kind of canceled each other out, if you believe in a spoiler effect. So they're not, but I wouldn't be surprised if they turned in that direction. They are blaming progressives for not turning out for for Kamala. And they're not wrong. I mean, 10 to 12 million people didn't show up, who did
Mm-hmm.
show up for Biden. They didn't show up for her. Well, why? Who are they? I guess that's the big question. Who are these non-voters? There's no exit polls for non-voters. So,
Right.
but you can do a study. You can figure it out. And it's, by the way, it's basically, you figure out demographics of everyone who voted for Joe, and you subtract everybody who voted for Kamala, and what's left, given that we didn't have a major population spike between
Right.
2020 and 2024, is those voters. I suspect you're going to find a disproportionately high number of people who just didn't like either candidate and who just found her slight or disingenuous or a Weasley or pro-genocide or whatever. But those are the real reasons she lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird. She had a 107-day campaign. She squandered 40 not doing anything at all. And as it turns out, those 67 days were probably too long, not too short.
They are blaming progressives, and it's aggravating the hell out of me because they're blaming lefties in two fronts, one of which is disingenuous. So the first one is, like you said, well, progressives didn't show up. Well, yeah, you didn't give them a reason to show up. You went running around with Liz Cheney. And they're reporting behind the scenes that they were begging her not to do that. Now, there's no way to know if they were actually begging her not to do that, or whether this is just kind of, after hours saying, well, we told her not to do that. I don't know which one. It seemed like it would be a bad idea on its face to run around the country with Liz Cheney while also ignoring your base. Basically, I'm going to reach out to other Republicans because I think my base is going to vote for me anyway. Okay, well, that didn't work all that well. The other way they're blaming lefties is they're effectively saying that they were held hostage by the far left. Now, what they're not saying, though, is this is not the far left. They're talking about woke stuff, like the transgender bathrooms or women, trans women in sports. They're talking about that, which is not part of the left. I'm sorry. That's some stuff that Hillary Clinton basically used, or the Democratic Party uses, in lieu of the economy. So instead of dealing with the economic issues for, say, like a Bernie Sanders, where we're dealing with workers and making sure that the PRO Act gets passed, the increase to Social Security, the ensure Medicare for all, free college, that is the left. The stuff they're talking about is just woke stuff that the Democratic Party uses in lieu of doing the economic stuff because of the reason and the way that they run their campaigns. Basically, they need money. The rich people aren't going to pay for those things. However, there's no money that needs to be invested into identity politics. Ergo, they go with the idea of identity politics and call that nonsense the left. It's not the left. It aggravates me to no end. I want to play this clip. This is Sanders. And they asked Sanders, hey, what do you think about this? Sanders pointed out that Democrats have fundamentally abandoned the working class. And because they abandoned the working class, that they, where's this clip? Because they abandoned the working class, here we are, that the working class didn't show up for them. This is Sanders. Let me know if you can hear this. I want to make sure everyone can hear this all right.
He's met with some sharp reaction as well. This is what Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi had to say. Take a look. We'll get the reaction on the other side.
Bernie Sanders has not won. Let me, with all due respect, and I have a great deal of respect for him, for what he stands for, but I don't respect him saying that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class families.
Senator, how do you respond to Nancy Pelosi?
Well, Nancy is a friend of mine, and we've worked together on many issues. But here is the reality. I have to say to Nancy, in the Senate in the last 2 years, we have not even brought forth legislation to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, despite the fact that some 20 million people in this country are working for less than $15 an hour. In America today, we have not brought, in the Senate, we have not brought to the floor the PRO Act to make it easier for workers to join unions. We're not talking about defined benefit pension plans so that our elderly can retire with security. We're not talking about lifting the cap on Social Security so that we can extend the solvency of Social Security and raise benefits. Bottom line, if you're an average working person out there, you really think that the Democratic Party is going to the max, taking on powerful special interests and fighting for you? I think the overwhelming answer is no.
There it is. I think the overwhelming answer is no. Do you really think the Democratic Party is going to the mat for you? Ted, it's that, right?
It is that. There's a sense that I mean, working people. And one thing Bernie said on another occasion over the last week was, I don't see how you win in an election in a country where you where you ignore the working class when working class people are the majority of the
Right.
voters. Now
Right.
that's really huge, right? I mean, it's profound. And he's right. Look, Nancy Pelosi, she said words, but they didn't mean anything. The fact is that back in the 1990s, frustrated Democrats who were always short on the money game decided to reach out to big corporate donors and prioritize them. Now that makes a lot of sense if you're just after money, because I mean, obviously it's a lot easier to get $100 million from one company than it is to get $100 million worth of $37 contributions from individuals. But it's like, then of course you are beholden to that corporation when you come to power, and you're going to take their calls, and you're going to care when you're running for re-election what they think of, whether they're happy with you and your record or not. So that's what he's talking about, abandoning the working class. It's abandoning the working class as a power base, as a major donor base, as a primary support for the Democratic Party, and then turning to Wall Street is what happened, right? And he's right. I mean, he sent out a really off-message broadside the day after the election about the same exact issue, where he said basically, stay tuned. We have to have some major discussions. We have to do something new. Jamarl, let me turn things around and ask you. I mean, I think I know what he has in mind. I think he's probably gonna try to ramp up Our Revolution, his PAC, and turn it into kind of either a way to try to launch a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party, or suggest creating breaking away entirely and creating another party. But what do you think?
I think if he was going to do that, he should have did it after his run, or even before his run. Like when Sanders was at the height of his popularity when he ran against Hillary Clinton. Okay, fair enough. He didn't believe he could win. He didn't believe that energy was out there in the country itself. And so he ran that race in a more sheepish way. Basically, he ran it in a way where he wanted to push Hillary Clinton as opposed to actually win the race. Fair enough. He didn't know. In 2020, Sanders had the whip hand at the very beginning of that race. But again, Sanders was always sheepish in going after either Joe Biden or, for that matter, Hillary Clinton in any real way. And so my thought at the end of that race was that he had, several 10, 15 million people. All of these people were willing to basically crawl over hot glass in an alien invasion in order to vote for Bernie Sanders. And he took those people to say, hey, go vote for the Democratic Party now. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, maybe, I wish he would have did that earlier. If he does it now, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I guess the question I've had for people when they've come on the show is what happens to the Democratic Party now? And I guess Sanders, who's not technically a Democrat, may have something to say about that, because I think the party should have effectively been what Sanders wanted it to be. As you pointed out, when the center falls, when you have the situation where the center loses a radical loss of credibility, people start looking for something else. And on the right, there were no superdelegates. There wasn't this process where you could weed out a candidate like Donald Trump. The left had that process where they could weed out Sanders and keep him from getting to the political ballot. What should have happened, honestly, was Sanders versus Trump, where you have the wings of the party come into play when the center falls in order to create a new center of American politics. You didn't get that. So you ended up with Trump being somewhat radically different in the things that he's saying and the way that he's acting. I don't know what Sanders is going to do. And I don't even know what the Democratic Party as a whole is going to do. And I guess I wish I had an answer for that. I guess my question to you is, what do you think the Democratic Party is going to do? Meaning, now that they've lost on this massive effing level, how do they recobble something together? I mean, for God's sake, they even lost the popular vote. They lost the House. Well, they will lose the House. They lost the Senate. They lost the Supreme Court. They lost it all. So what's next beyond putting Kamala Harris on the bench, which is what some of the Democrats are trying to do, or trying to get Joe Biden to step down so Kamala Harris can be president, which is, again, rather stupid to me, considering the woman just lost a national election. What do you think they're going to do now? How do they cobble this back together?
Well, that's a good question. And I just want to say, in terms of Bernie, I totally agree with you. He should have done this a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And your analysis of 2016, and I was pretty up close and personal for that, working on a book about him and with him. That you're right. That's how it was. I mean, he didn't expect to get the support that he got in 2016. And, I think the reason I think he's going to do something, he's going to bust a move this time, is he's 83. He's just been safely reelected to a 6-year term. He really now gives no shits, right? Bernie, it's too late. Okay. But I think now, but what will the Democrats do? I mean, look, past performance is no guarantee of future returns, as they say in the commercial. But past performance suggests nothing at all. That they will continue, that they'll stay the course. I mean, there are rifts within the DNC. There's a younger faction. These are the people who leaked the Hillary emails to WikiLeaks, for example, at the DNC, who would love to get to drive the car. And, that's always the conversation in a situation after a debacle like this. Hey, Gramps, you drove the car into a ditch. Give me the keys. I want to drive now. And it's like, so the question is, will stubborn Grandpa Munster turn over the keys? I suspect probably not. But if they do, it's going to be after a ferocious fight. The last time we saw a fight like this, it went the other way. It created the state of affairs that we see now. This was after the defeat of George McGovern in 1972 by Richard Nixon by a electoral college landslide and a popular vote landslide as well. The Scoop Jackson and the right-wing Democrats who ultimately formed what we call the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council, right. Those people, basically, they won that argument during the Ford years. You lefties, the liberals, the progressive wing, the socialists, you guys, you went too far. The country's more conservative than you. We get to drive the car. And they've been driving the car now since 1976, starting with Jimmy Carter. Can that go the other way? History doesn't really suggest that. I think you're already seeing people say, actually, the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren wing of the party drove the party too far to the left. We've got to become more like Trump. I think not only does it go against my ideology, but it's also, I just think, factually just wrong. I mean, I think what has been repudiated, not just in the United States, but also throughout Western democracies, is not the left, even though in countries like Hungary and France and so on, it's the center. The neoliberal, corporatist center militant moderates, there's no room for them anymore. Voters want more of a clear choice, ideally from a spectrum of choices, but they want clearly defined solutions and ideologies, whether they be on the left and the right. And I think the DNC is trying to hold on to a center that honestly hasn't been around probably since the early Obama years. Obama kept things going through sheer charisma, and you still see it now. We haven't had a politician like him in a long time. Well, Donald Trump is a politician like him in terms of charisma, but it's maybe they can put it together like that, but it's hard to imagine the Democratic Party even attracting people of that quality because they're in this dysfunctional organization. No, I don't think they're going to learn their lesson. I think when we're going to have a completely open election in 2028. Historical cycles suggest that we're going to be facing some sort of major problem on par with the Civil War by then. And I suspect it's going to be climate change. I mean, I spent the weekend, sucking up smoke, wildfire smoke. I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Okay? Yeah. And so we don't have wildfires. It hasn't rained a drop in 5 months in this city. We don't do droughts in New York. New York is a city where it rains. You don't have to think about it. Every couple of days it rains. And it's now it doesn't rain anymore. The environment is in rebellion. It was in the 80s last week, all week. That's not normal. It's November. It's supposed to be snowing now sometimes. I mean, so it's I think the climate is getting away from us. I'd be very curious to see if behind the scenes when Trump is advised by real, serious, scientifically minded people whether he will be able to stick with the drill baby drill approach, and not just be like, look, I have to actually pivot and do something. We've seen him do that. I mean, Operation Warp Speed. That is not something that President Hillary Clinton or any other Democrat would have approved. It would have been like, we have to go through numerous tests. We're going to need 5 to 10 years of like, make sure it's 100% safe. He was like, rock and roll, let's do it. He was right. And he could be right again. I think at this point, Trump, there's a good chance that he's thinking about his legacy. It's like, he wants to be beloved. He might wants to leave office in 4 years and as like being thought of as the best president ever. He wants to be on a coin. He wants statues. He wants buildings named after him when he's gone, not just the ones that he put his own buildings. So I think, there's a chance here. I'm actually not, quaking in terror of a second Trump administration. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think, the Democrats, I think they're screwed. I mean, they would have to completely embrace the left wing. They're congenitally opposed to it. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. So I agree with you on all that. I agree with you on most of it. I am cautiously optimistic with Trump, weirdly enough. And I think probably because my expectations are so low in regards to what he's going to do. I assume he's going to do tax cuts. I assume he's going to try to do the immigration thing. But again, both of these things aren't things that haven't been done before. I mean, we're $35 trillion in debt. Donald Trump, George Bush, all of these people passed these massive tax cuts. Even under Obama, he enshrined 80% of Bush tax cuts into law. And I remember when Bush passed those tax cuts and people were like, oh my God, this is the end of America when they passed the tax cuts. So I expect him to do horrible, grisly things like that. On the standpoint of the war, I am deeply hoping that he maintains his campaign pledge to end those wars. All of these people have been killed for no reason. Just purely geopolitical expansionist aims of the Biden administration and the administrations that came before Joe Biden. So even after he got elected, he said, my first guiding principle is whether or not it's a campaign pledge, and I'm going to stick to my pledges. So we'll see. I'm not quaking in terror. I agree with you. I am more so optimistic. From my point of view, Joe Biden was going to get us into a larger war. And it was very possible that either him or Harris would have ended up in a third world war, even from sleepwalking and just incompetence and hubris alone. So at the very least, Trump has positioned himself openly as, I'm going to be the person to stop wars, not start them. And keep in mind, he even took attacks from Harris on this front, where they were like, oh, he's working with dictators. He's going to give up Ukraine. And Trump was like, we need to stop these wars, meaning he never deviated from that point of view over the course of the election, even after the attacks on him for that point of view. So I'm cautiously optimistic on that front. Climate, Trump thinks it's a hoax. So I'm less inclined to believe that Trump is going to be willing to all of a sudden radically deviate from that. Now, Elon Musk is working with him. Elon Musk is big on the electric car front. So who knows how Trump ends up taking that, whether or not he can be convinced to move in a particular direction on that. The electric grid is not set up to even deal with the electric cars in a way that, let's say, like a China or something like that. So I don't know. I got to be honest. This is a wild card administration to me. And as a wild card, it could go either way. It can be to the benefit or to the detriment of all of us. I honest to God, I'm in the spot of just not knowing. But to be fair, I had no idea what Kamala Harris wanted to do either. So I'm kind of in the same spot.
Well,
Let me ask you one thing before I want to get into this clip, because the liberals, for your point, they're blaming the left. And they have went with this idea that the left is basically, well, transgender kids, or getting your pronouns right, or all of these other things that I would argue are not really the left. This is kind of woke ideology that is part of the Democratic Party, not necessarily part of the left, even though it's being categorized as that. And they're arguing, people like Hillary Clinton, that, yeah, we're captive to the left, and that was part of the problem, that we had to cater to the leftist policies. And to your point, they would be better off catering to economic populism, not this idea that the left is somehow this other stuff that the American public doesn't like. Isn't this a canard? isn't this the Democratic Party trying to replace one with the other because they can't necessarily deal with the fact that economic populism is where they should go? And so they're blaming the left, pretending as if that this stuff is elements of the left and not necessarily democratic ideology. I'm saying that poorly, but I hope you understand what I'm saying on this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but I mean, the sense it's kind of like worse than smearing the left wing class analysis. They're literally making it not exist in the public space.
Yes.
And so they're replacing it. They're like redefining it and saying like, okay, so that we're in a left versus right political environment, which goes back to the French Revolution,
Right.
but we're going to redefine the left away from as if Robespierre and Marx and Lenin and Mao never existed, and now the left is going to be this identity politics stuff that
Right.
we talked about, and there's going to be no class analysis at all. And look, for the reasons that we talked about earlier about that Bernie Sanders talked about the corporate donations. Of course, the Democratic Party can't have economic populism because that hurts the bottom line of their principal donors.
Yes.
And in the end, that's it. It's kind of like if they do that, they're going to get an angry call from from all of their CEO donors saying, WTF, we donate so much to you. And like, now you're doing this to us. Like, I thought we were friends. I thought we had an understanding. We pay you. Why are you doing this? And I think so that's why they can't do it. I mean, they would have to literally reinvent their fundraising model.
Yes.
And this is where Bernie comes into play,
Yep.
right? I mean,
Yep.
Bernie this old guy from Vermont with his mittens reinvented the small donor model. And it was a powerhouse in 2016 and 2020, those $29 donations. And it's like, if they went that route, then they'd have the independence. I mean, it's sort of like, you and I are both doing our own shows here online. We're completely independent, right?
Mhm.
So we have I want a sponsor, right? But let's say someone calls and says to you or I, like, okay, we'll sponsor you, but we make this product and we want you to say that you like this product, or at least not say you don't like this product. And like, I mean, that's just reality. That's just the
Yeah.
relationship. If someone's paying you, you don't have freedom. And, and even if they never crack the whip and they never call in that favor, like that scene in The Godfather at the beginning, like, someday your godfather might need a favor. But like, even if you never get that call, the fact that you could get that call always circumscribes your behavior.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what the Democrats are doing. I mean, they're completely owned by the wealthy donor class. And so as long as that's the case, that's the structure. You said very, very well that Donald Trump this Trump administration is a wild card. Why? In large part because there's not really like big corporate donors. Not a lot of them. I mean, that's not where Trump 2.0 gets its power. It gets
Right.
it from being at the head of a vast political movement
Right.
that is outside of a lot of traditional structures. I mean, Donald Trump is like, he's 78 years old. He's not going to get to run again. He's probably he'll be lucky if he lives through this term. I wouldn't let JD Vance around like my food that was around my burgers that were untouched. It's like he's got to be thinking, I can do whatever I want. And like,
Yeah.
and I'm free to be, I'm free to do what I want any old time, like the song says. So, I mean, it will be super interesting to see what a human being with that much power does with it, and with a high degree of independence.
Yeah. Ted, I have about 1 minute left. They are trying to blame Joe Biden. That's what they've effectively landed on. It's Joe Biden's fault. Kamala Harris ran a perfect campaign. She was flawless. She was spotless. Nobody could have won it. Joe Biden should have gotten out of the race sooner. And as I keep pointing out, if Joe Biden got out of the race sooner, there's no guarantee that Kamala Harris would have A, won the primary, or B,
Probably
won
not.
the little mini primary that they would have had at the convention if they were thinking about it. Nancy Pelosi has come out effectively saying, yeah, Joe Biden should have gotten out of the race earlier, missing the fact that Nancy Pelosi also said earlier that, well, we had an open primary. So just to close it out, is it Joe Biden's fault? We have about a minute left.
Well, I mean, yeah, Joe Biden never should have run for re-election, and he should have said from the certainly after the 2022 midterms, I'm not running for re-election. 1,000,000% he should have said
Yeah.
that. And also he knew that he was very old and and therefore less likely to finish his term than a younger man. And that's in fact what happened. And yet his choice of vice president was not someone who was likely to be able to, pick up the torch. I mean, important point. Sitting vice presidents rarely win after a president leaves office, right?
Yeah,
it's very rare to get like a George H.W. Bush situation. It almost never happens. It's only happened once in 188 years. So, I think it's look, Biden bears responsibility, but the Democrats carried water for him the entire time, and the DNC could have gone to him and said, Mr. President, you no longer have our support. You can choose to run for re-election, but you'll be doing it as an independent because the party does not support you.
Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist. Ted also has his own show. Ted, what's the name of your show? You and Manila run today. And what time does the show air?
It's 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. You can stream it later on YouTube and Rumble, but it's called the TMI Show, Ted Manila Information Show, or Too Much Information.
Check it out immediately after this show. Once again, just like the one on Sputnik. Ted, man, thank you for this. Look, let's take a quick break. I'm going to come back. We have our next guest here, Michael Maloof. He's here. So let's give us a moment, and we will be back in 30 seconds. Back shortly.